it's a, I think we're feeling pretty good about knowing what to get done, and we're progressing to get it all done. It's just the window in which it all has to happen is tricky. But it's happening.
Well, at least healthcare is not complicated.
You're not going to stop the calendar, that's for sure.
Yeah. I'm not sure when healthcare won't be complicated anymore.
Any other questions? All right. We'll keep moving along. The next item is an action item to authorize the superintendent to examine claims against the district for school expenses and draw orders for such as shall be allowed by it payable to the party entitled thereto.
Valerie does that.
And that means what?
That's,
If that
Well-
sounds like legalese.
Well,
it's
we
because
can't talk
is.
about it tonight, because it's an action
It's
item,
not-
we need a motion.
It's not English, but it might be legal.
So moved.
All right, Alice moves that. Is there a second? Aaron? All right, now we can talk about it.
So when we last met, we looked at the recommendation for payroll and accounts payable approval processes, and there was some question about pre-authorization, post-authorization from the board, and what works there. So I've been talking a fair bit with Steve Stitzel about how that has to work. And so this is a portion of the statute that talks about the board's responsibilities for authorizing payment. So I checked in with Steve Sitzel's office, and I talked with superintendents in our surrounding districts, and all of the surrounding districts, to some extent, authorize payment post facto. Boards authorize payment post facto. And part of what gives Steve Stitzel comfort, which I think is also what gives those boards comfort in authorizing post facto, is that they authorize the superintendent or some other delegate to sort of act on their behalf. So this cites the statute that authorizes me as superintendent to examine claims against the district and to pay folks for those claims against the district, all those 2,500 vendors. As we talked, so Howard and I really processed, and Howard processed with his team, what would it take to be able to not make any payments to vendors until the board has taken action. And it was probably 3 meetings a month, possibly more than that, to be able to approve basically consent agenda items. And that seemed excessive, to be able to basically pay the bills that are already budgeted for in a budget you've approved. It's different for payroll. This is really about payables. Payroll, we have contracts for employees, and that's sort of all set, and the board signs on contracts, so that was less of a concern. The 2,500 vendors that we have payables that go out to, that you all look at, would be more complicated. So in the context of policy governance, with the board taking this action to authorize me, Steve Stitzel felt comfortable with the process that you see recommended for payroll and accounts payable. So this basically would allow us to continue to operate the way we currently operate.
That's essentially what the treasurer was looking for, some reassurance.
Some authorization that the board has said it's okay for her to sign checks when,
We haven't signed.
under my authorization. And I would say, just for clarity, in my absence, so we talked about a process before, that in my absence, Katrina is my backup and Howard's her backup, so we would follow that same process here. So if I'm out for some reason and we need to sign pay orders and pay folks, then as my backup, we'd follow that same process for those folks.
Any other questions? Jen?
So do you currently review all of those because it was my understanding that Howard was currently handling that. So is this changing that or adding a responsibility to you that you don't currently have?
No, so Howard is the one that Howard and others review each of those, and I rely solely on the fact that they've looked at those in detail and have caught any errors and things.
And that's consistent with now, with today.
Correct. Yep.
So this motion and then the following process, that will, the next item, cover us kind of twofold.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So, well, I have a question, but I'm not sure which one it goes with, but they feel linked together to me. So part of what the discussion, as I remember it last month, was when was the treasurer actually reviewing it? So in this new process, the treasurer would be looking at the expenditures before we are, rather than after, because I think she was describing looking at it after us previously.
Right, if we
So
took no
now she would be
action.
looking at, like, so your office would look at it, the treasurer would look at it and could sign the checks, and then we would look at it kind of last.
Correct. And I think what the treasurer was looking for was, if that's the case, she wants to know that the board approves that.
No other questions? Okay. All those in favor of authorizing the superintendent to examine claims against the district for school expenses and draw orders for such as shall be allowed by it payable to the party entitled thereto, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm opposed to the wording of that. It's ridiculous.
State statute.
The motion carries. All right. Next item is also an action item to approve the recommendation for payroll and accounts payable approval process, and that was an attachment to the agenda. So moved. So Jen?
Second.
And Krista.
For discussion purposes, there was some conversation last time around the 1 week piece, and it felt fair enough that if board members are expected to give feedback, at least a week prior, that we're committed to giving you time to do that. So we did add language in there to state that you would get it early enough to do that. So holding us a little more accountable to the timeline.
Any other questions? Concerns? Comments?
Well, this process is probably, if for some reason we find it unworkable for whatever reason, it can be adjusted on a fall.
For sure.
down the road.
Yep.
So that's gonna start in August? We'll start seeing that in August?
I think we can do that. Does August make sense, Howard?
Well, yeah,
We'll have some-
August, you'll get them, because that'll be the first board.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And no more questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the recommendation for the payroll and accounts payable approval process, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Down to board management and governance. First item is to accept the monitoring reports for 3.2 and 3.3. These interpretations were developed way back a very long time ago when we started looking for the document. So it's been a little longer than the normal process to get them back, and neither Karen nor I could figure out what happened that they got so stretched out, but the interpretation was done the same way that it was in the past, and here are the reports.
And it didn't say on the reports, who are those prepared by?
Those, Elin and I worked together, but it was so long ago we couldn't find it.
Do we need a motion to discuss?
Yeah, we could.
So moved.
All right, Sarah, is there a second?
Second.
Dee, all right. Yeah, yes, Elin and I did work on them together.
Can you just explain the process of so this monitoring report, it seems like it's more about like the board than the superintendent, and who is this for?
This is for the board.
Okay.
This is in our section of work, and C1 and C2 fall under the superintendent's work, and C3 and C4 fall under the board's management and
Yeah.
governance process. So this is really the board looking at their work and seeing if they are in compliance with the policies that we've adopted. So I believe in both of them there are areas of non-compliance, and there's an explanation about why we're in non-compliance and the plan to get us, how we're gonna get to compliance.
Mhm.
So it's sort of checking ourselves. Are we doing what we say we believe in policy and what we've adopted as our process? Are we doing that in our work?
Okay.
So. Any other questions?
Is the May 2017 when this was written?
The interpretation was, and I think May, then probably June, the Policy and Governance Committee got to their last meeting, and then, we started building for the next year, and it just got placed on the calendar. Because we had a list of priorities. Again, when the year started, we tried to prioritize which ones we wanted to have reports for first.
And then, in terms of policy governance, the process will be much smoother with one board. And not just one board, but in addition to one board, the interpretations will all have been done, and nearly all of the policies will have been written at least once, or the monitoring reports will have been written at least once. So then it's a matter of just sort of adjusting those monitoring reports to reflect the current, more recent past. It's been fairly cumbersome to this point.
That's the back and forth with when it's written and where it goes and then who it goes to next and feedback. Jen?
So I think that this is great, and I appreciate you and Elin doing it, and I think that if we were looking at a report that was written by the superintendent, we would probably make a comment about maybe needing a little more evidence the next time. So maybe as we go into that cycle of the next round,
Right.
like we can all be thinking about, or the reports that we're each responsible for, we can think about what kinds of evidence, could we continue to add. I feel like every year when we look at something, then we think, oh, it'd be great to have this next year.
Right.
So as part of our improvement process.
Definitely, as we're doing the whole process, I think there's more opportunities for conversation about, hey, what about this, or hey, what about that? Right now, it's piecemeal, it's a part here and a part there,
Yeah.
so.
And this is a result of the executive committee's review as well, right?
Yes, they saw the interpretation, the policy and governance group saw it, and then the executive committee saw it, and there was feedback at the time of the interpretation, but I don't recall there being much, if any, at that point.
Yeah.
So.
And the executive committee has it on their agenda for tomorrow night.
Right.
So this is kind of one of those de facto.
Right, at this point.
Right.
Next time we do it, it'll be all us.
Right.
So, any other questions? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring reports for 3.2 accountability of the superintendent and 3.3 delegation to the superintendent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passed. Okay, now we're gonna get into some more. Okay, our next item is an action item to accept the conveyance of the Beaman School property by quitclaim deed of the New Haven Town School District and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfers, and other related closing documents.
So moved.
Jen?
Second.
All right, Sarah. Okay, any discussion?
So this is the formality of officially accepting, really, what you'll see on here is there are the debts and the assets. Right now we're talking about the school buildings, which are more assets than debts. And you'll notice that Starksboro's not on here. Allison noticed that earlier. That's not a miss, that's intentional. Starksboro's a little more complicated in terms of the facility, in terms of, so the current Starksboro Town School Board is conveying acreage to the town of Starksboro, and they have to advertise that in a particular way for a certain amount of time. So that process is unfolding, but isn't ready for your action tonight to accept that, and the Starksboro Board tomorrow night won't be conveying that property just yet, but that's forthcoming.
So that's likely an August maneuver.
Probably.
And the lawyers are okay with that not happening at this point?
Because technically each of the local boards by statute exists until the end of December, because they have to still accept the auditor's report, so they still have some authority to be able to make this transfer between now and then. So it'll happen in that window.
Any other questions? All right.
Can we make a joint, can we make a motion?
I don't know that we can do that, but the difference is, I think we have to do each one individually.
It would be cleaner to be sure that it has officially happened for each, as cumbersome as it would be.
All right.
Well, luckily, we shouldn't have to discuss it each time.
Nope, we should be really good at it by the time we get to the last one.
All right, all those in favor of accepting the conveyance of the Beaman School property by quitclaim deed of the New Haven Town School District, and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that one passes. Next action item is to accept the conveyance of the Bristol Elementary School property by quitclaim deed of the Bristol Town School District, and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents.
So moved.
Jen, is there a second?
Second.
Aaron? Any discussion, comments? All right. All those in favor of accepting the conveyance of the Bristol Elementary School property by quitclaim deed of the Bristol Town School District, and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Item D, an action item to accept the conveyance of the Lincoln Community School property by quitclaim deed of the Lincoln Town School District, and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents.
So moved.
Sarah? All right, is there a second?
Sure.
Jen? Any discussion?
So I do have a question, and we'll ask it about Lincoln, because I'm wondering now. So the only one on here that specifically mentions debt is for Robinson. So with the transfer of Lincoln Community School property, that's assuming the assets and the debts, is that correct?
Mhm.
So the only reason Robinson is listed separately is because we're
No
only assuming
assets.
the debts and not the assets right now?
So the Lincoln was covered in the consent agenda with the acknowledgement of assumption of debt from the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. So that's where the debt for Lincoln is. The debt for Robinson is not with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, it's with Merchants Bank. So it just kind of showed up in a little different spot. And that was something we caught just before the agendas were going out, so that's where it ended up. But we are assuming the debt for both as well as the asset.
Thank you for your
Nice
clear
try, though,
answer to a detailed question. So I wasn't trying to trip you up, but I was just trying to, it was confusing that it was different.
If only we could get in the building without the debt, we'd go for it.
All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the conveyance of the Lincoln Community School property by quitclaim deed of the Lincoln Town School District, and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, another one done. Another action item, to accept the conveyance of the Moncton Central School property by quitclaim deed of the Moncton Town School District and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents.
So moved.
Jen, is there a second?
Second.
Krista. Any discussion, questions, comments? All right. All those in favor of accepting the conveyance of the Moncton Central School property by quitclaim deed of the Moncton Town School District and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Another, F, another action item, to accept the conveyance of the Mount Abraham Union Middle High School property by quitclaim deed of the Mount Abraham Union Middle High School District and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents.
So moved.
Second.
Allison, is there a second?
Second.
Steve. Any discussion, questions, or comments? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the conveyance of the Mount Abraham Union Middle High School property by quitclaim deed of the Mount Abraham Union Middle High School District and to authorize the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board Chair to sign any tax returns, permit transfer forms, and other related closing documents, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. And letter G, another action item, to approve the assumption of debt for Robinson Elementary School in the amount of $20,000 to the Merchants Bank.
So moved.
Allison, is there a second?
Second.
Krista. Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. All right, all those in favor of approving the assumption of the debt for Robinson Elementary School in the amount of $20,000 to the Merchants Bank, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right. Item H is to authorize the chair to sign for the transfer of all trust fund accounts with American funds to the new unified school district. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Aaron? And
I'll
is there a second? Krista? Any questions, comments? No? Allison?
Just making sure that if a trust fund is specific to a school, it stays with that school, it's just under the auspices of the
That's correct.
unified district.
Yep, and that's written into the Act 46 Articles of Agreement. Until those funds have dried up, they remain for their intended purposes.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, all those in favor of authorizing the chair to sign for the transfer of all trust fund accounts with American funds to the new unified district, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Our added item is a discussion, which is now the new letter I, is a discussion item on the next meeting.
So earlier in the consent agenda, you approved for posting the policies that would be adopted by MAUSD. And what that is it's the 4 sets of policy governance policies. But instead of reading, especially now that they're corrected, instead of reading A and ESU, they're MAUSD. So there aren't any language changes from those current policies. And a while back, this board, pre-March, so some of you weren't on the board then, but this board had fairly lengthy discussions after it was first created about how to govern themselves, how to govern the schools. And after that conversation, consultation with Val Gardner and who's the other guy that was at VSBA who came with Val?
Harry Frank.
Harry Frank, yes. Ultimately decided that they would govern by policy governance, and Now, this just simply adopts those policies as they're written currently, and they'll evolve over time as we kind of iron some bugs out and make the language work. But this gets those policies officially in place. And the other policies that you approved were all of the state required policies, but nothing more than the required policies. There are currently a lot of policies beyond what is required. I think it's work that will be ongoing for this board to think about what beyond policy governance and the required policies do you want. But I didn't think right out of the gate to just adopt all the policies that exist right now made the most sense. I think it's important for this board to determine what policies to use and not use. So that's what you approve for posting. Legally, they have to be posted for 10 days before they're adopted. Generally speaking, what has happened in the past is policies would be posted one meeting, and your next meeting is when they would be adopted. Your next meeting in this case isn't until mid-August. So to not have policies to follow for all of July and half of August didn't seem like a great idea. So what I'm proposing is that I have Karen work to find a meeting sometime shortly after 10 days from now that these are posted, or probably 10 days from tomorrow when they'll actually be posted, that we have a very brief meeting to adopt those policies that will have been posted. I think it can be something where I can be physically present in the office, that space can be made available to the public, and it can be warned for that space. And as long as we have a quorum, you could all phone in. We have a fairly smooth system that we used last time. We had sort of an emergency meeting that I thought worked pretty well, that can handle a fairly high volume of folks. So if that seemed agreeable, I can have Karen send out a doodle poll, and we'll find a date sometime in the 10 to 15 day range, hopefully.
So if people can't be there in person, a phone call will give us a quorum and we can just have, it would be a very brief agenda.
Yeah, and it's really not a big deal at all, I don't think, to phone in. So
We
even
can
if you
get-
can be there, but it's kind of a hassle to drive 15 or 20 minutes each way, then
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary.
Or from the beach. Not me, but.
What do we consider the risk of not having the policies in place until August?
Probably somewhat minimal. But for what will be a 10-minute meeting, it seemed like it wasn't worth the risk. I mean, I don't think it's not gonna change the way we operate in terms of central office, which is really the bulk of the work that will be happening between now and the next meeting is gonna be happening at central office, but it's probably not good practice.
Any questions? So watch for a doodle poll and go from there.
Yep.
Jen? So I'm gonna try and squeeze this in under this agenda topic. In August, are we having a retreat and a business meeting, or is that all gonna be in the retreat? Or is that something we have to decide at the retreat?
Historically, what's happened, and we could do a retreat and a separate business meeting. I think we probably should do some business in August. Historically, what has been done, at least my historical goes back 2 years, some of you go back a lot longer than that. We have a good portion of the day is sort of professional development and sort of that sort of board work, and typically a fairly brief sort of business meeting.
That's the way, I mean, for a long time. You just work the business and at the end of the meeting.
So for planning our calendars, we should plan on having a retreat and not a business meeting in August, unless this board decides to do something different. Not a separate fourth Tuesday.
All right, anyone else?
our new J item would be the discussion around the Mount Abraham Recreation Survey, which was included in your packet, and that would also allow time for the Community Engagement Committee to give a brief update, because they've been talking about this at their meeting. So Caleb's not here, but he did mention that you were, did he mention it to you?
I mean, he asked me if I would give an update about the meeting. I did not know that I mean, did Caleb ask for that survey to be put on the agenda?
No, I did.
So, I mean, we can maybe kind of roll it in, but I don't really, I mean, like, that's been your thing, so I don't really feel comfortable
No, I
talking about
I certainly
that so
plan on
much,
talking
other
about
than that
this.
we talked about it at the meeting.
Right.
So,
Do you want to give your community engagement update, and then we'll get,
sure, I'm gonna look at, Liz very kindly sent some minutes today. Some draft minutes. So we had a good discussion. We met 2 weeks ago. We have had some public participation in our meetings lately, so some of the members of the 5-Town Community Forum, I believe that's the right name, Sue White and others in that group have been attending those Community Engagement Committee meetings. So it's been interesting to have some engagement with our engagement committee. And we talked, we both mostly have been talking about the community forum that this board asked that group to plan around the bond / the facilities. After talking about it more, we felt that we should maybe be looking for a date in October. We've been kind of, it feels hard because it keeps moving further away. But at the same time, as we thought about, the work that we need to go into having it be a meaningful conversation, we thought it was better to have a better event and have it be a little bit farther out. We talked about, and you guys jump in, but we talked about also perhaps collecting feedback in the meantime, which was kind of where the survey came in. That's the one that Steve had worked on. And we also talked about wanting to have the forum be facilitated. So that's part of the reason that we were thinking that we would need to push it out a little bit, because in my experience, when you work with a facilitator, they can do a lot to help you shape what that event looks like and what, kind of what your question is, what you're trying to accomplish. And so to kind of rush through, we probably would not be able to have as meaningful of a planning of that. So, okay. You want to add anything to that?
Trying to remember, did we set our next meeting date?
I don't think that we did, but I think that we kind of said that we probably wouldn't meet in July as per general board.
And we
procedure.
were going to try to meet after or before the retreat?
I think we were thinking after, because there was feedback that we wanted from the VSBA
That's right.
around, not necessarily specifically that, but more of the school councils, which we also talked about. So we thought that would be helpful information to have, and that how, when we do go to do a forum, and it is including ideas that having, for me, so when something doesn't fit into the scope of what we're talking about, if we're talking about a renovation, then to have a really, for me, it felt like a really important thing to have a really clear understanding of where these ideas can go. And so for one, just understanding right now where they go. So, that was in board training originally. So go to your teacher, go to your principal in that process for certain ideas that people may have around energy or issues that come up that maybe don't fit what we're looking for at the forum. And so if we did have an idea around school councils or just other outlets for ideas that, and we are looking for input about where to go next with the bond, where else to have an answer, to be able to direct some of that in the appropriate. So feedback from you, from the VSBA, all of that will be really helpful, and it just seems like it will be an important thing to have a handle on before we do the forum, and I think it will help it go well, personally.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. So part of our discussion was, while like what we're trying to envision this community forum related to the facilities as sort of this board and the community engagement committee is going to be doing a series of community engagement events. And this is the first one that's gonna be talking about the facilities, but we also wanna make sure that it's kind of a, yay, we're this new board, you know, all this stuff is happening and this is something that we're here to talk to you about today, but it's, should have a different feel than just like, come in and tell us what you think about the facilities, you know, that it's more of a invitation to connect with us on topics like the, you know, the facilities and the bond. And so they're, you know, depending on, you know, I think we were looking to possibly get some input from a facilitator of, is there a way that we can have an event that talks about both school councils and the bond? You know, can we strive, maybe it's a divide and conquer kind of event or something, but that perhaps there's a way we can have both of those conversations.
Yeah.
Has your group talked at all or consider or is considering when you do a forum or you do something that invites participation, you get a certain group of people that want to be engaged, and it might not necessarily be the majority, if you will, of the feeling of the whole constituency. So there's somehow that balance that needs to be, I don't think addressed, but pursued on how you can connect with the people that aren't engaged to be connected with, but more than likely could be carrying a group opinion that could sway the overall intent of what the group may be hearing from the people that are showing up to these things.
Yeah, we talked about that for a while, and I think, you know, we talked about the fact that our charge as a community engagement group is to really figure out all of the ways in which we can engage our community around all of the different decisions or things that we're going to be doing, you know, in our district, and that a forum around an issue is definitely not the only way to get feedback from people. And so, you know, we talk, and the survey that Steve worked on is an example of another way. You know, we talked about even being careful not to call it a bond forum, but to sort of have a conversation about the fact that, you know, we have lots of facilities that, for the board, Mount Abe is sort of the most pressing one. And so here's, you know, let's contemplate what needs to happen with that. But, you know, I think we recognize that, you know, as a board, we have to make sure we're tuning into people in lots of different ways regularly, so that we're not just trying to get people to respond to a particular thing in one particular way, because it is not going to be representative. And we also talked about, you know, we were trying to figure out I was asking about when we were meeting again. I'm a little muddled about how we came out, but I think, you know, we were even talking about having a more casual, like, here's the new board, and like a meet and greet even before we had a facilities conversation. I don't know if we'll have the time to do that, but you know, even around the school council idea, that the best engagement is one that's really seeks lots of input and then provides information after, you know, about a decision. And so for school councils, for example, going to schools, we're going to people in communities and figuring out, well, what do you think would work at your school, and getting ideas and soliciting input instead of coming up with a really set plan of what we think might work, and then trying to inform as many people as possible about that plan. So, you know, we have a lot we're chewing on, I guess, is the long-winded answer to that. And I think that we're trying really hard to make sure that this first foray into, you know, engaging folks as a new board is successful, and not predetermined and not the only way that we're gonna have this conversation. So, you know, that's another reason why we said October, because, you know, nothing's gonna really happen in the summer, and also we need more time to really think through how to make this work. I think the 5-Town Community Forum folks were really happy to help us spread the word and get people involved and engaged, but we did clearly recognize that they're not the only people out there, and that just like we're a group, they're a group, and there's lots of other groups, and so we didn't want it to be like we're, you know, partnering with that group, because then, you know, that's also exclusive, and so, so I don't know. We're chewing on a lot, I guess, is the bottom line.
And I think that in still thinking about it, tomorrow is an opportunity to meet and greet the new board, but I didn't think of that soon enough to kind of, because that would have been a time when people are gonna come and we can say, we're the new board, this is what we're about. So,
Yeah.
yep, and also being able to present the information about, so as a board, when we do wanna go for this, being able to present the information that has already been gathered from the last 3 months. So I think that would be really helpful to know what already has been done, have it there and available to read or access, or just so that, I think that would be helpful. And I thought of town centers. There's Lincoln General Store, Starksboro General Store, different places that we could put a shorter, perhaps, survey out, or advertise our forum in places with people that just stop in to get coffee in the morning. So there are definitely lots of ways to reach beyond the 5-Town Community Forum, and I think that we're dedicated to doing that.
So, one more thing,
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, so I think something that we are struggling with a little bit when we think about the task from this board to have an event related to the facilities and the bond, is that the Community Engagement Committee doesn't know what the questions are that need to get answered about the bond or the facilities, and so I think we are trying to find the right balance of putting together an event, but that there really might be value in this board considering forming a committee about facilities. I know a couple months ago when we talked about it, you know, we didn't want to do it at that time. You know, on the other, if that's something we're still not ready to do, then I think that we're gonna need input from this board about what information does this board need to be able to decide what to do next about the facilities? Because otherwise, you know, we may just have an event that says, come and tell us what you think about our facilities, you know, or, I mean, I think we can probably do something better than that, but, you know, I think the goal of having the event is to get to a place of going, so what do we do next? You know, I guess I am under the assumption that we are probably going to have a bond or a facilities or some named committee that's going to work on figuring out what to do about improving, you know, and the renovations that need to happen. So, you know, what information does this board need to decide, okay, we're ready to form that committee, or we know what steps we need to take to get on that path again? Whatever that path may be, and it may be very different than the path has looked before. But so, I don't know that that's something that we're prepared to discuss in detail tonight, but I think that, I think it is definitely a concern that we have, because we don't know what the questions are that need to get answered.
Well, my recollection, through just memory, not writing anything down, I recall that the whole idea of the communication committee taking that topic was more trying to sense the mood as opposed to structure what the task might be. You know, there's been 3 bond votes that have failed. There's a whole big discussion about what's affordable, you know, what the perception of what's affordable, you know, what the future of student populations are, you know, does that play into things, state financing or state support, fiscal support, you know, all those kind of things conjure up, if you will, what the appetite is. and where all that fits in with the level of renovation or improvements, whether it's just maintenance or improvements, that will be palatable.
So, should I segue into this just to maybe, we can then come back around after I?
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing first?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make, I wanted to say too that I think we don't want to try to create a process that's going to redo everything that's already been done. I mean, I guess you already sort of said that, Liz, by sharing what's already happened, but, or the information that's gathered, but I think, you know, we really do want to figure out what information we need to know how to move forward, rather than, you know, going through the same process that's happened before, because the information's already there.
Yeah, I would just add that, like with Steve's survey, is that in order to get an accurate reading of the mood, that's what setting up the surveys, but as a group, or figuring out what the questions would be, the survey, the forum, any ways that we can think of to really get a solid read on all of those things that you're talking about. That's what we wanna, I think that's our goal, versus to gather the information ourselves and then bring it to you. So maybe that's where we're thinking about it differently.
Just add a comment from the discussion that we had about how were we gonna move forward discussing facilities and or Mount Abe. What I remember is that it came down to, we were gonna talk about facilities as a whole first and not focus on just Mount Abe, to kind of broaden people's minds about what we as a new board are thinking about. And it's not just Mount Abe, it's all of our facilities, which includes the superintendent's office as well. So, just me personally, I'm thinking that, at least with starting out, it has to be a general, broad conversation about the facilities as a whole, that the district oversees, and then that plays into the strategic plan, because I'm assuming the facilities are part of that, or at least part of the money conversation.
It'd be part of the financial plan.
Right, the financial planning. So, I think we had talked as this board about not focusing so strongly in the beginning on Mount Abe specifically and a bond, if that were the direction, because we don't know what direction we're gonna go.
Yeah.
And I was gonna add something similar, just that we do have a lot of information right now specific to Mount Abe. We have been a lot of assessments done specific to Mount Abe, a lot of work leading up to the pursuit of a bond. We have some information, but not to the same detail about the elementary schools. And there's a little bit of information about possibilities for what could be the future for a central office. But we haven't really talked about some of those. And if we do want to talk more globally, there's probably some assessments we would want to do of the elementary school buildings so that we have comparable information for all of our facilities to be able to make informed decisions.
Allison?
And I remember from our Act 46 work, Alden actually pulled together kind of a list of things that each building, things to pay attention to for the immediate horizon. So that could be a starting point. And some of those things have probably already been taken care of. But at least we don't have to start from square one with that.
Right, so I think that was actually one of the comments I made when the capital spreadsheet came out originally, was that it should be backed up by an assessment of each school. So that you're not just looking at the things that the facilities guy knows are right in front of their face that they've got to fix, but you look at it holistically and they're all looked at in similar fashion. Everybody everybody gets looked at their ADA compliance, everybody gets looked at whether their roof's been replaced in the last 20 years, blah, blah, blah. So you have a broad picture of how all those buildings compare to each other as well as their obvious needs. So,
Do we have that yet?
no, we don't have an assessment of each school. Not unless
We
one
have
was
a number
done.
of more narrowly focused assessments, like you were mentioning, like we have some assessments on ADA, we have some other, so we have very specific assessments that might collectively provide a picture, but I'm wondering about the benefits of a more comprehensive assessment for each school that really sort of lays out.
Well, that's something that also can be put into a database that allows you to manage the buildings down the road. Sort of a campus facilities management plan. And there's probably some assessments that were done for, say, the Lincoln renovations, you know, so
Right.
that the same process that Doran Whittier went through for this building was done before any of the big renovations were done on any of the local schools. So there is some historical assessments that could be utilized to help build the current picture. This particular survey really just came out as a result of my attending the June 2nd Five-Town Community Forum discussion, where folks were grappling with the idea of how to come up with some momentum to move forward with understanding what the mood of the entire community is for investing in this building, and not just a bond situation, but really running the whole gamut of, do you want to just fix things based on a yearly investment in the budget, currently similar to as you're doing now? Do you just want to fix the maintenance stuff and the code compliance stuff and not do anything further? Do you want to expand the concept into something more elaborate, as some of the folks at the forum has suggested, to do things like add a new classroom wing and then lease the building out to other parties? Basically just throwing a lot of the ideas that came out in the forum discussions into a survey, along with some basic questions about how would you like things to be financed. Mainly questions that you would love to have on a bond vote that you can't put on a bond vote because it can't get that complicated. So, and the thought was that it would go out to absolutely everybody who actually wanted to participate, so that there wasn't any political alarm that we'd somehow excluded anybody from giving their 2 cents, and that in compiling those answers, we wouldn't be telling anybody that this is exactly what we're going to do, but this is going to help us understand what level of investment we might want to do in this building to fit it into the larger picture for the whole district. So that's kind of the preamble that's in front of this on page 1, just trying to frame why we're doing this. And then the questions are essentially just trying to narrow down how people can wrap their heads around, you know, what level of financing they'd be willing to contribute, or whether they don't want to contribute any financing, which is certainly probably a large number of folks out there, but at least we would know kind of what level those folks represent, and we could shape our policy based on the results of that. So originally this was just going to be something to help the Five-Town Community Forum move forward. I wasn't doing this as a board member, I was just doing this to help them. I was going to write an example survey so they could see how it might be utilized. The response was pretty good. People have been pretty positive about it on their end. When I brought it to the Community Engagement Committee, just because some of the members actually were also at the forum or participating in the forum, the suggestion was that maybe this might be something that the board might want to either authorize or join in authorizing. So I wrote it, I revised it to sort of make it a joint effort to say, hey, look, we're joining with the community to go out and find out what the mood of everybody is here, and maybe this is something that could be, you know, my initial thought was it's something that we might be able to put out fairly early in the summer and just kind of let it germinate over the summer and come back to compiling it, say, in September with people having plenty of time to be poked and reminded and maybe get a little more participation than just giving them a little narrow window to respond. And that way we would start the new year with a real solid sort of take on what people's feelings were in the community and be able to discuss that in the forum, not necessarily put out solid proposals based on it, but at least say, here's what we've found, we've talked about it, and figure out a way to move forward from there. So, you know, whether the board actually wants to be a co-author here, or maybe they want to take authorship, or if they would rather just hand it back to the five-town forum and let them move forward with it and take their cue from, I'm not really sure it matters who authors it necessarily. There's just a little bit of, you know, who authors it has some potential political ramifications, but I think it's really just important to understand the information. So there's some funding issues. How is it actually going to get funded? I talked to Karen Wheeler briefly about the last cardstock full mailing that went out for the bond. And these aren't exactly similar in the way they would be handled, so they can't take the dollars for dollars, but it was like a $2,500 investment to do the last mailing. And this is likely going to be less printing, but probably more postage, so there's an order of magnitude in that neighborhood of some sort. And then there needs to be volunteers to compile all the information at the end, and that, depending on the number of folks who respond, it can be a fairly healthy exercise. There's some move in the community forum to also maybe try to do this more scientifically and simply hand it off to like some folks from UVM or somebody to do maybe more scientific sampling where people would be contacted directly in a number that represented a scientifically significant sample. That would probably be more expedient and maybe less troublesome. But politically, in terms of asking everybody for their opinion, you might lose some of that feel-good atmosphere. So that's a lot to spout out here. I'm sorry to take everybody's time with it, but just sort of curious what people thought about the whole exercise. If people even have had time to read it.
Sarah?
I think it's a great survey. And I don't know, you know, obviously I'm totally new to the sport, but I don't know the board's role in, you know, being a co-author of a survey such as this. It seems that if we were to co-author it, then it would send the message to the community that, like, yes, we're still working on this. Yes, we're interested in the community's input. You know, there's the whole introduction page says, you know, this by no means is going to dictate what happens, but this is just to get a read on where the community is. So I think that in that aspect it's great. I mean, I know that a lot of people don't understand how they can actually give input unless they go to the 5-town forums, and it doesn't work for people's schedules, or so this is a way of you know, including. I mean, I would just think somehow get it to as many people as possible.
I just probably really whomever authors it, whether it's the 5-town group or the board, I think it's important to ask questions only of things that, especially if it's authored by the board, that the board would consider pursuing. For example, so the public-private partnership, I think there's some thought that would need to go behind that specifically. If the board's going to ask the question of, would you support that? Because if we ask the question, is this what you want, community, and the community says yes, and the board then decides, well, we can't do that, or it doesn't make sense, then that can be frustrating to the folks taking the survey. Immediately, things that come to mind for me there is, so what control does the school, does the school board have over the visitors in this public-private partnership to your facility? Is there security concerns? So that's where my mind starts going in terms of, let's not ask the question if we're not prepared to go there, and if we haven't had this conversation about security, about this one question, are we prepared to ask that question as a board? You know, if the 5-town community asks a question, we don't have, the board has no real authority over that group, so they can ask whatever questions they want. but there's some thinking behind some of these that I think is important. The question 2 about spreading the funding over the next few years, does that mean are we talking about adding lots of money in each budget for the next few years, which then runs the risk of spending threshold considerations? So there's more questions I have about this. I think administering a survey, absolutely. I think if it came from the board, as you were saying, Sarah, it says we're still paying attention to this, it's still important, it's not going away. But I want to just be really thoughtful about what questions we're asking and knowing that we would be, as a board, committed to pursuing those, depending on the community's response.
Yeah, and I think, sorry folks, but I think that that was one of the reasons why I almost felt more comfortable generating it first off from the forum's point of view. That I didn't really have any of these caveats involved. And certainly when I was writing it, I had almost all the same questions you just had. How are we actually going to do a private partnership? That's going to take a legal structure that's going to go on for debate for quite a while. But in the forum, there's some real, hey, why aren't we thinking about this? And frankly, there's a lot more ideas that are even on this survey that are coming out of the forum that have even wider ramifications. So that is one of the things that co-authorship does pose a problem.
Krista?
And I guess I think if we, go back to what the purpose would be, those concerns might be really clear to us, but they're clearly not clear to other folks. And so I wonder if we're not authoring it in any way and it's out there, and then that presents an opportunity to talk about it with folks that in an educational way. At the last forum, it was a really small group, and I was there, and there was a conversation we had a good conversation about school councils and the potential limits as from a board perspective. And I think that was, an educational opportunity for some folks to see that, oh, okay, there are some things that should be grappled with first. And so it seems like if we want to engage people with big options first, a big option survey that we don't maybe author, but that's out there, would encourage maybe more people to feel they can participate in the visioning, and then maybe we decide as a community if those obstacles are surmountable or not, but we do that together versus not asking the questions at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I was thinking is if I don't know if this should be, sort of back to Allison's point, a MAUSD survey, because that's again sort of limiting the conversation and will make people feel that it's already kind of, that's where we're headed, is toward a bond. And it just means a longer process, I guess, but in the spirit of keeping it really open, and that's a narrowing as well. So,
Allison?
We just have to remember that if the 5-town community forum puts out the survey and it's not sanctioned by the board isn't bound by anything to make anything happen on that.
Right.
And so if we do author it and put it out as a board, then there are other ramifications that go along with that, especially with the questions that get asked, and it gets handled in a completely different manner. So I don't know I think it has to be an either or. It has to be a board thing with help from the 5-town community forum, or we just say, do your survey, maybe with some input from a few people, but it's not sanctioned by the board, and we don't have to take any action on anything. Thank you for the input.
Sure.
I don't want people to think that a survey coming out is going to answer all of the questions and we're gonna start moving forward on some things they think are gonna be answers, and they're not gonna be answers.
Well, right now, the problem is there's a pretty low threshold of information. There's people, and we have these votes where people have been able to say yes or no to a very specific question, but there's some subtleties to to what level people are willing to participate, as Kevin knows, trying to find that threshold and trying to sense that out that's the point of this, is let's at least scare the rabbits out of the hedgehogs, out of the bushes, so we can figure out how many rabbits there are, and then work from there. So I'm certainly open to anybody throwing some suggested paragraphs. I've had lots of feedback from a bunch of different folks about the way to edit this and to reword the front page, and so adding some more language to the fact that we can't be bound by this, or if anybody wanted to add any of that kind of language, I'm certainly open to any of that as well. So.
I was gonna say, people, if you specifically call out that we're not bound by this, you're almost saying fill it out, but we're probably not gonna listen to you. That would be my fear, like you'd have to really phrase it in a delicate way.
Yeah, the front page is pretty delicate. It's tough.
But what I think is great about it though is you're saying, you're encouraging people to this end, we encourage you to complete this and give it to your friends, give it to your family. Like if this is important to you, share it. We want everybody's feedback. That I think is pretty powerful. Especially to the people that are really passionate and support this project. Okay, you're passionate and supporting the project, let's all go out there and garner support for it. I also do like some of the questions, like specifically asking, what would you be willing to spend? I mean, because I know that that's been a sticking point with people that I've spoken to in the community about. If it was this dollar amount or this range, I might be for it, but I will not approve it as it is today. So, okay, what would you approve? At least we have something to work with, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we may not like the answers, I'm not guaranteed that's.
Yeah, I know, a lot of people will be like, nothing, I get that too. But.
Yeah, so.
Kevin?
Couple points directly to the surveys. A lot of the questions to me seem black and white in the sense that there's a yes, no as the answers, or was there any consideration, or is that maybe there's a maybe, I don't know, or I
sliding
don't
scale,
care, or something like that in there. The other thing is when you get towards the part, and this is just a personal burden myself, but when you start talking about the points of the previous renovations, it's almost like you're just like herding people back into what has been discussed before. And if you want to keep it wide open, the conversations and the questions 11 on and that little grouping of what has been considered in the past may not be the best way to have people thinking or directing. The thing is, as far as the five-town community, I didn't attend the last meeting. I have attended some, and I understand, we've talked about this sort of before, about the limitations of private-public and association with the rec field. They're developing something along those lines and all that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of excitement for looking for those types of alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
And not discounting any of those. So.
And so it would be, and I can understand the reservation of this board putting out a survey and making a straw poll, if you will, that nothing happens. So maybe it becomes important for this to go back to, forum. They're a very motivated group. They can get the feet to the pavement and all that kind of stuff, and let it go where it was, and then we reap the benefits of the feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. I think that we need to keep as many questions on here as possible, and if we're not comfortable having, being a co-author of these questions, given the fact that there's so many complications, understand that. But I think the questions are useful. I have talked to so many people that are really passionate about the private-public idea. Are they considering all the complications? Not necessarily, but think it would be helpful to get a read on like, what are those actual numbers? Is it just a few people that are passionate talking about it, or is, you know, that kind of in the undercurrent of a lot of conversations that are happening in the communities? I also, you know, I don't think by sending out a survey that makes us bound to make any decisions based on the results. I mean, that could be my naivete, but it seems to me that it's an effort to get information and to get a read on the community. So it seems like putting the brakes on something that could be very productive by saying no, because we don't know the complications of something that we're not even gonna ask. And even going to like asking about all of the schools in the district, to wait until we get assessments on what the potential renovations are before we ask all of this, you know, about Mount Abe or any of the buildings. It just seems like to put too many steps in front of something that we have currently that we could start getting information on now. I don't think we should wait to get the assessments on all the other schools, because I imagine that process would take a while. You know, and then it would be waiting in the wings for all of that information to come together.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the other facilities have all gone through some forms of renovation in the past decade or so. I mean, you know that there was very little bond debt out there on those schools. This is obviously the biggest elephant in the room. So getting some better handle on what people are willing to invest here will help inform the larger picture, I think. The one thing I want to respond to you, Kevin, on the last group of questions. I mean, there's almost as many people who are willing to participate in the votes who are in support of those issues. I didn't want to exclude them, and it was really an amazing amount of work to get to the point where those were the focus of those bond votes. So I wanted to give folks the full breadth of their opportunities to say yes or no to something. And I think the sliding scale thing is a good idea instead of just the black and white, but leaving some of the work that the past groups went through to define some priorities that were specifically highlighted by students and by staff. I wanted to make sure that those questions were still in the survey, so that's why those are still there.
Is there anybody who hasn't said anything want a chance? Over here. All right. Erin.
How can we get our hands on materials from all of the past?
It's out there.
Just like
Go to the website.
the
start
website,
digging
it's all
around.
over, start digging around?
It's there. There.
So I did have to do a little hunting to come up with the absolute original version of the Doran Whittier feasibility study and the appendix study that happened after that. That's not, it's either hidden on the website somewhere or it's not easy to find. And I did pass that around to the forum because they were specifically asking for it. And I think I had mentioned it might make some sense to pass that around to the rest of the folks here.
Would you mind sharing?
What's that?
Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, I actually sent it back to Karen and Patrick.
I'm gonna let Krista go and then Krista.
I'm just wondering, and maybe Liz or Jen have thoughts, what our group might need to, I mean, we don't have an action item on this. I guess we're just sort of hearing recommendations to figure out how we want to proceed with the survey at this point. We're going to meet again in August, after the retreat, I think it was. So I'm wondering what else would be really helpful from this group while we have them here to help us figure out what we want to do next.
I do have a
little confused over the purpose of the 5-town community group. So I'm not sure if it's about this particular building, or if it's about what the needs are of the 5 towns as far as a facility for all 5 towns. If it's not about facilities at all, I might just be misunderstanding. I don't know, it might have nothing to do with this, but the part of the survey, when I think about what is their goal, what would be their goal in giving this survey as well?
So I'm probably speaking way out of line because I didn't form this group.
Okay.
But my sense is that it was born sort of out of frustration with the 3 bond votes, and that they were trying to get as many people who would come to talk in a more free-form method rather than to a board meeting, to just basically think out of the box, talk about the relationship of the 5 towns to the school, what opportunities are there to not only maybe address the facility issues, but to enhance mentoring, to enhance shared community use of some of the facilities, public partnerships. It's basically kind of a free-for-all discussion about what people would like to do to help the school.
This school.
This school in particular, but I think, looking at everything fairly holistically as well. So this is really just, as I said, it was a reaction to my going to the June 2nd meeting and people struggling with trying to figure out how to understand how to move forward on. There were also some topics that they were looking at specifically, like there's a HVAC committee that they formed. Let's fix the HVAC in Mount Abe. And they started down this road of maybe looking into another engineer to come survey the school and look at the HVAC, and I was like, hold on, I mean, that's been done. And that's why I was looking for the Dora Whittier report, because they had a mechanical engineer come and they've done a full survey. There's equipment listings, there's what you should be doing with the controls, there's how to make it more efficient. So they were pushing down the road a little ways on some things that I thought, we should be looking at the big picture and getting the community's, feedback on the whole project before we decide to focus on one maintenance item.
So kind of getting, and I want to give Kevin his opportunity and Jen here, but I don't want us to get too off the topic really is the survey. So, Kevin.
Going back to the question of there's information out there, and so is there information out there on the website? And somebody said something about the website. You go to the website and that sort of thing. Maybe Barry goes, is there information out there for all the other town or former town schools that have done renovations in the past, or was the reference just to the Mount Abe activity?
I think Mount Abe specifically because there was bond vote effort being undertaken, so there was websites built to disseminate the information according to the bond, that so people were informed on the bond. I think if you wanted to go back and understand the assessments of the other schools, you'd probably have to go to those. I'm not sure where that information resides.
I'm not aware of that being online right now.
It's fairly old information at this point anyway.
You might be able to see it if you looked at the individual town budgets and there was reported a meeting on sort of a 3-year facility plan. You may be able to see some old information on that, but you probably really have to hunt for that.
I have it.
Jen.
I can send you the link.
Jen.
Yes, you don't really have to hunt for it. So I wanted to come back to the question that Krista asked about sort of for the community engagement committee and the survey and the next steps. So the sense that I'm hearing from the discussion is that it sounds to me like a lot of people think that it would be interesting to have the results of the survey, but that probably it's not a survey that this board is gonna authorize. So my sense based on the discussion is that the community engagement committee does not have any more actions at this point related to the survey that I
think that's what I've been hearing anyhow, is that everyone said, Steve, awesome, thanks for doing it. Tell us what you get back. I don't know, and I don't mean to make light, but that's sort of what I kind of hear as the discussion. So I think that's my sense related to the survey.
Yeah, I think a straw poll would be fine if anybody wanted to conduct it, just to be clear about it, unless we really need to do that.
A straw poll about what?
Just whether you thought the board should participate in the survey or not.
Oh.
We can certainly do it if you want. So just, this is non-binding, just to give an idea. Would you be in favor of the board participating in the survey?
Well, participating in or
Co-op.
Co-authoring.
Essentially sanctioning it.
Yeah.
As a member of the community, not necessarily as a board member, right? So as the board, no.
There's nothing saying that five-town community forum couldn't come and say, hey, look at this information we gathered. We thought you might find it interesting. And that would be that.
Right, and to that point, I think, I just want to say that I can see why we as a board might not want to co-sponsor it, but I also see great value in the input we might receive. So I think that's really important, that we have this group of folks who's willing to gather information and that we can find helpful. And also, I just wanted to say that, I really hope that that this board can figure out how, when we have to make these, I always really struggle when we have to figure out what are we going to do about X or Y, that we don't have enough information, that we're just, 12 people trying to sort of make our best guess at what we think people might want in our community. So, it's my goal that, this is just one thing we have to figure out, but that it's a good example of how we can be sure we tap into lots of different avenues to get as much input as we can before we have to make those decisions, so.
It would allow us a way to engage the community in a different way and within the constraints of our working meeting, saying just to have a 20-minute conversation about the survey results they found and that kind of information. Allison?
To piggyback on what Don was just saying, by you all just doing this, we don't have to have this conversation in this format.
Right.
Sure.
This specific policy governance format that can be very cumbersome for a group like you. So you can do what you need to do and gather all of your results, and we don't need to, or you all don't need to listen to us provide input on, well, you should ask this question and then ask this question, but don't ask this question, not that question. You all just figure out what you're gonna do, and we can have a presentation and we can take the information, and it might get different feedback by not being tied to the board.
So for me, in my mind, this is what the benefit of a school councils or issue-based councils would be. This is why we want to do that, because there's our community engagement. That's what I envision getting once we do figure out how to do that, is this exact benefit. I think that's kind of exciting to think of it that way. And so for the group, though, I think we wanted to double check that we wanted to partner with a facilitator, because that would involve meeting with a facilitator and arranging to meet with them for the forum, if the board is interested in doing a forum.
In the past, like the Moncton board did it, and it was a big help to focus the work, to have, and at that time we had Val come in and help. I think it was a big help to have Val help focus the work and the plan for the course of the meeting. Big benefit to us.
In my opinion, the times we used that, there was that time, and then for Act 46, we had a facilitated forum as well, and it has been well worth it has not been all that expensive. It's been well worth it. So I guess the question is, do we need an authorization? It's not an action item on the agenda, so I think we can we can meet with we can have a conversation with the facilitator as long as we don't sign any contracts without getting an okay.
So-
It also seems to me that with the survey, that if we're looking at having a forum in October, when we meet in August, if, this survey hasn't really gotten off the ground with the 5-town community group, we could still choose to do, we could still choose for the board to send out this survey or some other version. So I'd be inclined to see what happens between now and then.
Yeah, so 3 things. One, my feelings are not hurt at all by you guys not participating. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to comment on that. 2, I would really welcome anybody reading it and giving me their feedback. And 3, just to your point, Jen, since we're sort of taking a break until August, it might give these folks an opportunity to conduct something over the summer, and then we'd all have some fresh information to start the fall with, so I think that's fine.
All right, thank you, Steve. Okay, I don't believe we're in need of an executive session tonight. Is there any public comment at this time?
I just wanted to say that in those packets, there was a signature page for the Vermont Bond Bank that each board member had to sign.
Okay, so don't run out of the building, because there's a couple of spots that need multiple signatures. So, yes. So just stop over here, because there's spots that need multiple board member signatures before we go. Yes.
I just wanted to ask the board to consider, and maybe the community engagement committee, the students in your work. I don't think, in looking at the 2013 stuff and all the committee notes that Shauna was a big part of, there weren't a lot of kids, and that's something we haven't done that could be the thing that needs to be done differently. Something to think about.
All right. Does somebody have the meeting evaluation up? They can run through that?
I can pull it up. Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
So I thought that we were gonna get an update about the agenda for the retreat at this meeting. Is that something that is not ready? I didn't realize it's not on the agenda, so there's just no additional details available at this point.
Not at this point today. We just received the initial information from BSBA about some of a packet of materials, so it literally just came
4
in
o'clock today.
this afternoon, so.
You haven't processed it yet?
So, we don't have anything other than that.
Okay, so we do the evaluation?
Sure.
All right, what was the level of engagement of all board members, high or low? Any comments? I have no comments about our high engagement. Was the agenda followed, yes or no?
Yes.
Comments about that? What went well with the meeting? Comments?
We're early. We started late and we're still early.
Okay. Any suggestions to improve future meetings?
I need sunglasses if we sit over here. We bobbed and weaved. That is not a complaint.
Okay, so no suggestions for future meetings? Okay. Do you want to adjourn?
I would love a motion to adjourn. So Jen is making the motion to adjourn at 8:13. Is there a second? Sarah? All those in favor of adjourning at 8:13, say aye. Aye.